All right. Hi everyone, and welcome to this Beef and Lamb New Zealand podcast, or webinar, depending on whether you're listening to it on the podcast channel or viewing it on YouTube. We're trying something a wee bit different today. We're going to record this and put it up in both formats so that people can access it easily. In the last interview I did, I had Beef and Lamb New Zealand CEO Sam McIver, and he discussed Beef and Lamb's overall strategy and goals for the coming years, sort of a helicopter view of everything Beef and Lamb wants to get up to. But one of the key planks he talked about in that was a new environment strategy and implementation plan, which has just been launched. Some of you may have seen the media. It was some fairly high level interest too, I might add. So today we're going to talk to Julia Beijeman, Environment Strategy Manager for Beef and Lamb New Zealand. So welcome, Julia.
Thank you.
Sam talked about the reorganisation of the Beef and Lamb New Zealand teams, and yours is a new role. So how about we start? Tell us what your day-to-day job is with Beef and Lamb New Zealand.
So my day-to-day job with Beef and Lamb New Zealand, we have a team of 7, including myself, in the environment space. And we do all things environment for farmers, basically, and that ranges from helping farmers through regional policy and planning, negotiating for farmers at like the national level in terms of central government legislation, but also everything around helping develop up extension projects around the environment and environment-specific projects for farmers as well.
Okay. So how did you end up in the role? What's your sort of background and qualifications for the big job?
So I originally studied forestry, actually, of all things, and then moved into central government policy, and so I worked on a number of different pieces of legislation in central government, and I've also done some work for regional council in the biosecurity space, and I've also worked for a peak body in environment around with local governments, and so I've kind of had each sort of corner of the triangle.
Oh.
So now we're trying to take all of those experiences and turn that into something positive for farmers.
Yep. So you've been with Beef and Lamb New Zealand a couple of years before you moved into this role, and over that time the environment team's grown in just numbers of people, and sort of the roles have expanded. So maybe tell us a little bit about that, and I guess the key thing is that's levy investment. How's it better than what we had before?
So before we had environment positions, but spread right across the organisation, so not one environment leader, and so things weren't quite as well connected as what they could have been. And so with this restructure, we've actually only ended up with one extra position, but they're now all into one team, which means that we can be a lot more coordinated and be a lot more effective around how we operate. All
right, so new reorganised team and a new strategy. So talk us through, I think most people listening to this have a fair idea why, but talk us through what the background.
Yeah, so several reasons why, but I guess one of the key ones is we're experiencing unprecedented public concern for the natural environment, and farmers are feeling the pressure from that a lot. We see quite regularly things around particularly water quality, but we also know that there's other issues as well that farmers hear about. But we've also got a changing climate. We've got our consumers are having just a higher expectation on what they're producing, and we're seeing regulation changing in response to the public concern as well. And then on top of that, we've got the disruptive technologies such as the synthetic meats coming in too. So all of those things could place a lot of pressure, but there's also lots of opportunities that become available with those as well. And so this environment strategy has been written to try and take those pressures or challenges and turn them into some opportunities for farmers.
Good. So we're going to drill into some of those things, what the issues are, whether they're real issues, how significant they are as we go through this presentation. You talked about sort of public concern, and I guess as well as dealing with actual issues that New Zealand's image here and New Zealand farming's image here and abroad is fairly important. You also talked about new regulation. So look, the obvious question is it just coincidence that we've got a new government and hence we roll out a new strategy, or is this something that's been happening before the election?
This is something that's been happening before the election. I think the new government shows just further around how the community and the public are looking for for more around the natural environment, but this has been in train well before the new government, and farmers since the beginning of time have been interested and care about the environment and been doing lots of work. So this is in part to demonstrate all of that great work that farmers are doing as well to the new government.
And it's interesting, our market team with some of their research domestically and internationally, I guess they want to make sure it's not just a greenwashing exercise. That this is Beef and Lamb New Zealand are committed to this, and you'll see that as we go through how seriously we're taking this. So the strategy's online. We'll put the link down below in the description, either on the podcast or on YouTube, so people can get their own copy of it. But in a nutshell, what's happening, or what's going to happen?
What's going to happen? So I guess just a really broad overview first of the environment strategy. So it's been separated into 4 pillars, and so that's cleaner water, carbon neutrality, thriving biodiversity, and healthy productive soils. But as you all know, the natural environment is a system and it can't be compartmentalised, and so all of the work that we do, they sit under those 4 pillars, but they also sit across those 4 pillars as well. And so it's when those 4 pillars weave together is when we start to get the all of the great work that farmers are doing around the environment. And I guess the other part of it is just to say that the vision that was chosen, and this was chosen by farmers, is world-leading stewards of the natural environment and sustainable communities.
Mm-hmm. So you talked about that chosen by farmers. I mean, where did these 4 come from, what was the process you went through?
So the process we went through to develop the strategy, I guess the very first prototype was developed. We had a group of farmer leaders and farmer environment reference group, plus a few key people from across the organisation and elsewhere came in and had a workshop, and they pulled together the first prototype of what the environment strategy might look like. And then that was sent out via a written survey to, I think, over 1,000 farmers, and there was also intensive one-on-one interviews with farmers right across the country as well to get feedback on that original prototype. From that, one of the key pieces of feedback that we got was that we needed more information to be able to put in really distinct measurable goals. So, for example, one of the goals that was in the original was under thriving biodiversity was increase wetlands by 40%.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know how many wetlands are on farms in the first place, so it's a little bit difficult to be able to do that. So the goals got changed a little bit so that they were a bit broader, and so that we could still continue to collect the information so that we can go in and add those numerical goals as we collect that information. And then from there we took that one-pager document through to central government and tested it with central government, and their feedback was, it looks really good, but without detail sitting behind it, it looks like greenwashing. So from there we developed the implementation plan, which is all the work that we're doing anyway, but just to communicate that in a high-level way for people to be able to see some of the transparency about what's going on and behind the strategy. And then from there we tested that with a number of different groups. We tested it with environmental groups, environmental NGOs, some environmental activists. We tested it with a number of researchers from across universities and Crown Research Institutes, private consultancies, Māori, all sorts of different perspectives, just to see how that might sit. And we tried to integrate as much of that feedback into the final version that we could.
Okay. Just one question on that. I do a bit of work on social media for Beef and Lamb and keep an eye on what's going on, and so I see it gets fairly heated at times with some of those organisations you'd mentioned, Fish and Game, Forest and Bird, that sort of thing. How's it gone down? What sort of response did you get when you talked with them and presented the final strategy?
When we first talked to them, they pulled us up on a number of things. They said that there were some things that we were putting in that were greenwashing and weren't particularly maybe quite as accurate as they could have been, and so we tried to include that information in there and give a really transparent and frank picture.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the final product, what are you had feedback from people that aren't just in the farming industry?
Yeah, so we have a number of the environmental groups have stayed silent, which is a sign that they like it. And we even had a media release put out by Forest and Bird to say that they supported part of it anyway.
Good. Yeah, it's interesting, the greenwashing question, and you brought it up. Around the election there was the Farming Leaders Pledge about having all New Zealand rivers swimmable, and probably rightly it got some criticism around there's no how you're going to do it or when. So as you go through this strategy, you'll see the how and the when and the what are quite specified. Okay, so got the big, what do you call these foundations, are they, these four?
4 pillars.
4 pillars, all right, so let's, we're going to look at each of those 4 pillars and some of the implementations and actions that come in under those. So this one, I've seen a bit of publicity around this, an active plan on every farm. What's that mean?
So that's one of our big goals is around every farm having a farm plan by 2021. And so a lot of farmers already have these farm plans. They might be a land and environment plan, or they might be a farm environment plan. And so that's excellent. So Beef and Lamb wants to put extra effort into supporting every farmer to develop one of those. I guess some of the key points are, though, that we know with the existing templates there are some parts that could be improved, so we're looking to make those improvements. And we also know we've done some auditing of our own templates and farmer experiences and that kind of thing as well, and we understand that the Beef and Lamb can be doing more to support farmers as well, and so we'll be looking to introduce some new wraparound or more wraparound support for farmers as well. We also know that through the Red Meat Origin brand, which is underpinned by the Farm Assurance Program, that they're developing up an environmental standard, so we want to align everything through that as well, and so the intent is that we'll reduce the number of farm plans that farmers need to develop, and so they can just have one, and that will do what they need for their marketing, but also for their regional council compliance and everything else as well.
Yeah, I think we'll be relieved to hear that. But even within that, within the environment component that should integrate with all those, are we talking, is it like the Lord of the Rings? There's going to be one plan to rule them all? Or if farmers have already got a plan with their local regional council or perhaps their meat company or something, is it going to do the job?
So there's still some of that detail that we're still working through, but the intent is one plan to rule them all. So what's been happening in the past is, particularly with number of regional councils now requiring farm plans, is we believe that that's put regional councils, given them the power to decide what the vision of success looks like for farm plans, and the intent of this is to put farmers back in the driver's seat and be in control of what their vision of success is. And so if we can develop a farm plan that will achieve, the regional council will recognise as good and compliant with their regional plans, but as actually a farmer driven one rather than a regional council driven plan.
How many, so look, 2021's the goal. That's not far away because we're halfway through 2018 already, and there's some development work still to be done. But in terms of progress, do you know how many farms already have one or a form of environment plan?
So we know the data shows around 40% of farmers have a farm plan already of some description. I guess the emphasis is, though, that it's not necessarily about having a farm plan, it's about implementing a farm plan. And so we do know that we can do more work around making that happen.
Yeah, so on the concentration on the active part of it. Okay, so what does that mean though? Is that audits or is that just proof of, or how? What are we talking about?
So that means, what it means is not creating a plan and then putting it in the bottom drawer. It's about creating a plan and that adding value to the whole farming business. So it's not just an environment plan, it's a farm plan, and that will help farmers to maximise profitability while farming within environmental limits.
So look, your work's shown, this is something that's important for the industry, and you talk about how it tied into things like farm assurance and branding and marketing and all those sorts of things. Is it all, what's the, how do you implement it? is it carrot, that sort of thing, trying to get people? There's not going to be regulation that say if you don't have one, you can't farm or anything like that?
No, and beef and lamb doesn't have those kinds of powers anyway. So it's there for farmers to take up if they want, but if they choose not to, then that's entirely their choice.
Cool.
But we'll try and offer as many benefits as we can for farmers so that it's worth their while to do it.
Yep. Just the last question on that, all sheep and beef farmers, I've got 7,000 square metres, so that's 2 acres, and I've got 3 sheep. Is that, how big do you have to be a sheep and beef farmer for this plan? Am I going to have to do one on my ranch?
So I think the definition is probably similar to what the economic service definition is around sheep and beef farms, which I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it's I can't remember.
Commercial unit or commercially operation. No, that's good. Look, and understandably there's some sort of grey areas around this stuff, but getting an idea for what we're after. Right, the next one, and I guess it sort of ties in a wee bit, catchment communities. What's the thinking there, Julia?
So I guess the thinking around catchment communities is, so we know, like, if we go back to like farm plans, every farmer doing a farm plan is fantastic, but when you can start to link what that farmer's doing, like that farmer is doing on their farm up to a catchment sort of level, you can start to link on farm to those wider environmental outcomes, and that's where you can really start to really make some gains. And this is, we believe, something that's been missing in the picture so far. You know, so many farmers are doing amazing things, but we're not necessarily seeing radical changes in water quality. And part of that is because it's a long-term thing. It's not like a linear process, but also, are we targeting the highest payoff activities as well? And so this is around working together to identify where those highest payoff activities are for certain environmental outcomes. And so an example might be in a catchment, there's one part of the particular catchment which is contributing a disproportionate amount of sediment into the waterways. And so if as a community we can target our collective actions to that particular thing. And so if we're having a planting day, let's do our planting day there, not just some random place along the stream or what have you. Then we can really start to make sure that our actions are having the biggest bang for buck.
Yep. And I think we've probably got some, I mean, this isn't necessarily a new idea, it's just an idea that's been shown to work well in practice. We've got some examples I can think of, like the Pomahaka group are probably a good one if people want to look up and see how these work. It's an idea that's already in place and working.
That's right. I guess the difference is that Beef and Lamb's never really operated in the catchment space before. It's been other groups, and so we've got a number of farmers who are wanting to get involved in catchment groups, and particularly, you know, as we talk about those increasing pressures on farmers around environmental regulation as well. So Beef and Lamb is looking through this program to work with those other organisations to really help leverage off one another and provide the most effective support we can for farmers looking to do that.
Okay. And it's interesting, you know, through Beef and Lamb New Zealand's work and the Red Meat Profit Partnership, one of the things they've identified is, you know, communities of interest working together, the farmer action networks that they saw as a missing piece of the puzzle, I guess, in tech transfer, extension, all these things. Is there some overlap there in terms of the Red Meat Profit Partnership action networks and community catchments? They could be the same.
Yeah,
sort of
absolutely. There's some exciting opportunities through the action networks. I guess the difference being that the size of the action networks are probably like a sub-catchment sort of size, but when you can start to bring maybe several action networks together, you can start to scale that up to catchment. So yeah, there's definitely some synergies there to take advantage of.
All right, so moving on to Foundation 3, Support Farmer Action. Again, tell us about this one. And when I was looking through it, it sounds similar to what we've just talked about with the community groups, but you're talking about something slightly different here.
Yeah, so Foundation 3, all the activities through this are more around Beef and Lamb's extension activities. So a lot of these won't necessarily be delivered through the environment team, but through our regional teams with support from the environment team to make them happen. And so part of that is integrating environmental management into just all of our extension programs, but with a particular focus on some where we know that there are higher risk activities for our sector. And so, for example, hill country development and winter grazing are some of those. And so really creating some more support for farmers around that. But there's also some other projects that we have. So one of them is we've got some money from the Ministry for the Environment to deliver a project under the Freshwater Improvement Fund, and that's working again with catchments, and so that has some really nice linkages into that catchment group work that you're talking about. And in a way, I guess it's getting a bit of external support to help pilot a few different ways of supporting farmers. And there's some similar with the working for the Waikato project as well. And then the other sort of actions are providing farmers access to different tools that haven't been previously available, and so one is a greenhouse gas calculator for farmers to be able to identify their on-farm sort of greenhouse gas profile, but then also the tools such as Lucy and Mitigator, which are really exciting new state-of-the-art tools that trying to provide access to farmers to get to use those tools too.
Lucy, LUCI, what's that?
So it's the Land Use Capability Indicator is what it stands for, and it's a model, and basically what it does is it looks at a catchment, and you can say, basically you can determine what environmental outcomes you want. So that might be what water quality outcomes you want, or what biodiversity outcomes you want, and then it will look at that catchment and it will tell you, it's a model, so obviously it's only as good as the information that goes in there, and it's not perfect, but what it can do is then tell you these are the actions that you can take to work towards those particular environmental outcomes that you want. And so the example I gave previously around, with the sediment going into the waterways, and so the Lucy tool would be a really key way of identifying that that particular area was a hot spot in terms of affecting your water quality outcomes.
So it's actually a tool that for the previous foundation with the community groups, that's something they could start working with Lucy as a group to get some objective information on where their biggest bang for their buck is.
That's exactly right. It's still a tool still under development, and so we wanted to ensure that as it was being developed, it reflected sheep and beef farms properly, and so this so the projects that we've got with Lucy right now is around still developing the tool and really getting it so that it's really effective for sheep and beef farmers to use.
And Mitigator, MITGATOR, if people haven't heard of it, what's that one?
So Mitigator is a very similar tool to Lucy, run through a different company, and so we just didn't want to be favouring any one company, and so it's around because it's not our role to support private businesses, so it's making sure that we provide farmers with equal access to the different tools, and as new tools come available we'll see where we can get involved in those as well.
So that's sort of talking on catchments, with water quality issues and soil issues and those sorts of things. The greenhouse gas calculators, what's the aim? Are they going to be on an individual farm basis? Farmers got to do their own stock take or a balance, I guess. That's
the exact idea, and so through that there's a number of partners who are interested in working on that. But the idea is to help farmers on an individual basis. Cool.
All right, we'll keep moving through these. Foundation 4. So this is, I guess, where some of the rubber hits the road, or saying you touched on there's things we still don't know or we need to get in place. What's some of the key ones for this? Research to support evidence-based action and policy. So
as you said, Aaron, like when we're trying to set those numerical goals, one of the key things that came out is we still need to have more information, and so this is all about collecting all of that information. And so some of those things that we're looking to do is collect overseer on a representative sample of sheep and beef farms, and so we already have an amazing amount of production data, so it's being able to line up the environmental footprint across our different farm classes. We know that sheep and beef farmers have been doing a huge amount of work in terms of increasing their efficiencies, and so we've got some information already which we've been using a huge amount around that, but the last paper was from 2012 and so it's just updating that information to make sure that we're keeping current, because progress has been made since 2012. We know that sheep and beef farms do a huge amount in terms of providing ecosystem services, so that's like biodiversity, habitat, that's protecting, riparian mountain areas to protect for clean water, providing, the trees for clean air, those kinds of things. And so we've got some research trying to quantify what those ecosystem services are. We're looking at the sector contributions to water quality. That was something that you'd think that we would know, but we don't. And so when we're going particularly into regional planning on behalf of farms, we can put the really clear information there. The same with carbon sinks on sheep and beef farms, and as around biodiversity as well. There's more we want to know around the soil health and structure. And then, so part of the outputs of once we get that data is around evidence for our policy, but it's also really great evidence really great information in terms of our actions as well. So for example, with biodiversity, we can then make sure that when we target our biodiversity extension activities to those areas where we can have the best bang for buck as well. So it's about informing our activities so that we can be most efficient and effective.
Just on that one, actually, around I think ecosystem services, one of the words, or biodiversity. I did actually see that about a year ago. There had been a bit of a stock take on just how much native vegetation is on sheep and beef farms. It was a really interesting stat.
So we've done the first step of that, and we've found that about a quarter of all Indigenous vegetation is on sheep and beef farms, and so the type of land where it is the conservation estate is the largest at about 33%, and
so we're not far from behind.
And then sheep and beef farms are the second. So huge amount of biodiversity found and protected.
I guess we don't have that yet, but one of the things you'll be able to measure over time is whether that's increasing or decreasing or changing.
That's step two. That's step two. That's what we want to do right now, because that's a really key part in the story around, particularly there's talk around a national policy statement for biodiversity, and so that's a really key part of the story to be able to, we think anecdotally that it's been increasing, and we know in some areas it certainly has been increasing, but once we can put that really hard and fast evidence in front, then we can say, look, farmers are doing this without legislation.
Without being the state. So that one, we can measure. I guess that's been satellite mapping and things like that. So the tools to gather the information are already there. Now we're gathering the information. There's quite a bit in here about gathering information. Is there any tools to gather that information that don't exist yet, or that we have to develop first, or is this stuff that we're ready to roll?
We're ready to roll. A number of these are already underway, and the ones that aren't underway, we're just waiting for the next financial year to roll around so that we can. We're all sitting there, so then we can program the funding.
Look, there's a lot in this strategy, and I mentioned at the start, but you can get your own copy of this document to have a look through and read through, and there'll be contacts in there to contact the team. So we're trying to give a bit of a helicopter view of things as we go through this. But we'll move on to the next one, to the fifth foundation here, which is probably one that creates a bit of interest with farmers. So that we've talked about the nuts and bolts, but this is the policy stuff about dealing with central and local government. Active engagement and policy discussions. What's going to be happening here?
So this is pretty much just a continuation of what we have already been doing. So within the environment team, we've got 3 policy staff, a North Island, a South Island and a Central, and between the 3 of them, they do a huge amount of work with farmers and with regional councils to work out legislative frameworks that achieve the outcomes. This legislation, it's there, it's coming, it's being developed, there's no way of getting around it. So it's about ensuring that these frameworks provide farmers with the flexible land use and recognise all the great work that farmers are doing.
Okay. Is there still, can we actually have real achievement in this area? This has been happening a long time. Policy has been happening. It was something, and I think it was a fair criticism of beef and lamb in the past, that we were a bit behind the 8 ball here. We weren't big in the space, and it was other industries were probably having a bigger say at the table. Is there still opportunity for Beef and Lamb New Zealand on behalf of sheep and beef farmers to significantly contribute and achieve outcomes and influence policy?
Absolutely, and the biggest opportunity is around nutrient allocation. So, a number of our regions, nutrients are allocated by the grandparenting system. So it looks at existing land use and basically allows. So if you have developed and intensified and have got a higher leaching profile, then you have more flexibility of land use, whereas if you've chosen not to, then you're capped at a lower leaching rate, irrespective of what the actual soil in the land is capable of assimilating. And so that's probably where Beef and Lamb sees its most opportunity, is to work across the primary industries, but also with regional councils and central government as well, to ensure an equitable allocation system that will result in thriving farming communities in perpetuity.
Okay. So grandparenting, and I don't know how much you want to get into this one, but is a hot topic for sheep and beef farmers, and for the reasons you so eloquently outlined there. Does Beef and Lamb New Zealand have a standard policy or position on that, or is it sort of taken on a case-by-case basis? What's the...
No, so we do. We have, they're available on the website, and we can provide the link to it, but there's, we've got 12 principles for nutrient allocation, and then so they're quite high level, but then through our planning cases that we pull together, we have all of the detail that sits in behind that in the very boring legislative type of language.
All right. Now, look, we'll make sure the link to those is somewhere in the description for these this interview as well. So, you've got a fair bit of work ahead of you here, Julia, so there's still more foundations to come. So, Foundation 6, Enable Farmer Leadership. What are you planning there?
So, I mean, we all know that farmers learn best from farmers, and farmers want to learn from farmers. So, this is ensuring that information there is available for farmers, for them to be able to share and learn from one another. So we already have a fantastic group of farmers, our Environment Reference Group, so it's about enabling them. We've been doing already a lot of work around increasing or working with farmers on like a broader scale, like up to about 100 farmers, and so it's while that's not captured in there, it's around continuing our work to support them. And there's also the Future Farm that Beef and Lamb within another team, but is developing, and that's around best practice across all spectrums, but obviously in this we've just pulled out the environmental best practice as well. So that's the intent is for that to be very open and transparent, so farmers can learn and see what's happening on the ground. Yeah.
So the Farmer Environment Reference Group, without talking about the individual farmer, who are they? How did they get onto that group? If we've got people listening to this or watching this that have an interest in that sort of thing, is it something that people can join or become part of?
If people are interested, then absolutely let me know. So the group is around 12 people that are spread across the country. We are definitely keen for if people are interested, for them to express their interest. And it's been quite a organic sort of group in the past, and so I think now that the strategy is launched and we're starting to move into these things, I think there's some real opportunity to maybe strengthen up and put a bit more a rigour around how we deliver that group.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, that group has pretty close links to the Beef and Lamb New Zealand Farmer Council?
Some do, some don't.
Okay. Yep. And their role is advisory, provide grassroots input to your work.
That's right, and to keep us on our toes, they challenge us a lot, which is fantastic.
Cool. All right, foundation number 7, which is sort of broadly linked with that one, tell farmers stories. Who are you telling these stories to?
Everybody, really. Yeah. So, like, one of the key things, and particularly from our Farmer Environment Reference Group, is you need to tell our stories better. Farmers are doing some awesome things, but people aren't necessarily aware of those. And so there's a whole lot of work in behind this. We've just pulled out a couple of the key ones here, but One of them is developing an interactive map, and so that is, so farmers can go online, and this is particularly linked to the catchment groups, and so that starts to take beef and lamb out of the picture. So say you're a catchment group and you're wanting to do something on biodiversity, you can go and have a look and see what other catchment groups have done around biodiversity, and you can get the information that they've got, you can get some contact details, and so it's trying to bring farmers closer together so people aren't trying to reinvent the wheel across the country. But we see that interactive map as having multiple benefits. So it's not just connecting farmers with farmers, it's also, it's very visual when you have a map with dots all over it of all of the great work that farmers are doing. Suddenly there's something really cool there for the public and for government to be able to see as well. And then it's like a one-stop shop in terms of, we're often asked for some case studies or stories or what have you. We can just send people there to have a look at that as well. But so that's part of it. But as we talked about one of the previous foundations, we're collecting a huge amount of information and data, and so through this as well, it's about making multiple uses out of the information that we are collecting, and so it's developing up fact sheets and information for different audiences, and in particular we're thinking here government and the general public, so that that information is easily digestible and will influence the thinking as policies and legislation is being developed.
Yeah, there's an interesting theme there, and in another interview we're going to talk about what our market team's been up to with the red meat story, but part of that is about understanding, farmers understand their business, but we perhaps don't understand how those outside farming understand what's going on, if that makes sense. In your interactions, have you seen already benefits, or when you're talking to non-farming entities, so we mentioned fish and game and forest and bird and that sort, when you actually can sit down and show them, again, it's not greenwashing, it's not ignoring the fact there are issues to deal with, but do you get a positive response when you go and tell some of those stories? Yeah,
and actually one of the most telling things that I found when we were consulting on this particular strategy, particularly with the environmental groups, they all really wanted to see sheep and beef farmers succeed. They were all like, they know that there's some awesome stuff there, and they just they want that information out there to support farmers.
Oh, that's good. So what you're saying, it's not about us trying to win an argument with those groups. They are genuinely interested in what's the partnership basically.
Yeah, absolutely, and they've approached us with opportunities to partner and work together. And I guess they bring in that they keep us on our toes and they challenge us, and so it's about when you talk about that greenwashing, it's about being honest where there are issues and acknowledging those and working with people like that who bring them to our attention, or being aware of them ourselves and saying help us to address these issues.
Cool. All right, we're getting there. So Foundation 8, be held accountable. Okay, so all the stuff's been great ideas, but I think you mentioned it right at the start is, where's the mark in the sand or something that we're coming to. So what's missing here? Are we... you talk about goals and measures. What have we not got or what do we still need to develop?
So we're talking about all of these different things, but it's really, really hard. Say at the end of 3 years, we can tick off and we can say, yep, we've done all those things, but what was the outcome? Yeah. And so this is around measuring outcomes, not outputs, which is really, really hard to do. But so this will be, we want to develop these goals around water quality, carbon and greenhouse gas emissions, biodiversity and soil health, that really all of this work, particularly around the catchment groups work and the farm environment plan work, that we can actually start to show, yes, we are making an improvement to the environment in these 4 key areas. So we definitely will need some help from very smart people from other organisations to help us set what those goals are. And also, this is part of this thinking is going into, as we're looking at our farm environment plan template, those kinds of things, so how we can actually start to collect the information and inform and give ourselves insights so that we can really monitor our progress.
Yep. So water quality's obviously been not the tip of the iceberg, it's been the big one, the one that's been probably most talked about or focused on, most public interest. Are we lacking measures there at the moment, or do we have enough measures in that particular one?
The thing with water quality is it's so complex, and so you can measure water quality. That's quite easy, but the cause and the effect is the really hard part. It's not A plus B equals C. It's not a linear thing. So that's really, really tricky. And so it's potentially looking at ways to show improvements in water quality. And also, I guess I should say that, you know, it's very, very long time scales, up to 80 years sometimes. And so, like, we might be heading in the right track, but we actually might not know for a generation or two that we've been making those gains. And, you know, while farmers are under considerable pressure now, then they don't necessarily have 80 years to say, see, I told you. So it's around maybe developing some SMART goals or that can help to demonstrate improvements towards water quality, but not necessarily, and that we're on the right track, but you might not necessarily see the improvements in water quality right now.
Given it's so complex, you know, and there's all those factors, I mean, are these actually going to be meaningful on an individual farm basis, or are these going to be the sort of things we work on a catchment or a region or basis?
There's probably still the detail like to be worked out and how we report on that. But the idea with these goals would be at a national scale. But if we can be really smart about how we collect the data, obviously we wouldn't be ever reporting on an individual basis, but maybe on a regional basis there might be some opportunity to aggregate that data up and report. But the intention of this is at a national scale.
But some of these farmers might be able to use privately on their own business just to stock take, you know, greenhouse gases or things like that.
Absolutely.
Okay, and we've reached the last one, I think, Foundation 9. So we're an export nation. This one's about represent our industry globally. This is probably one of the think locally, act globally type things, or think globally, act locally. I got that completely around the wrong way. You know, certainly for people that want to sell beef and lamb overseas. What's happening here, Julia?
So I guess our industry is quite different to a lot of other parts of the world. You know, we're largely extensive, pastoral based. You know, other parts of the world, they have totally different systems in the way they produce their beef and lamb. And so this is just ensuring that our New Zealand's industry is represented and accounted for when international agreements are made, those kinds of things, and so they're recognised. And so, like, an example is the Food and Agriculture Organisation marked New Zealand down quite a lot on biodiversity because we didn't have meadows of wildflowers, which is not a natural part of our ecosystem. And so it's about making sure that, you know, obviously we remedied that by saying, well, that's actually would be a really bad thing in terms of, you know, natural environments and indigenous environments. So yeah, it's just about making sure that our sector has a voice internationally and is represented. Cool.
So look, we've that's the key foundations, and there was just a couple of things we were going to have a bit of a chat about. You mentioned farm assurance, the NZ Farm Assurance Program, and obviously, hopefully, most sheep and beef farmers listening to this have heard of Taste Pure Nature, the new brand for New Zealand red meat overseas and at home. How does this all tie in? You mentioned they're quite linked. They're all sides of the same triangle, or
they absolutely are. And so, I guess, you know, the Taste Pure Nature, that is basically the vision of success that this environment strategy is trying to achieve. And so what we want to ensure is through this, all the actions through this environment strategy means that when the consumers they buy for their brand and what have you, there's not a risk of it coming back to the industry and saying, look, you guys are lying, or like that's not quite true. And so it's about working together to ensure that it's all works together and it's all like what the consumers are expecting.
So it underpins that brand, make sure it's telling a true story. What about with NZFAP, Farm Assurance Program?
So I guess the same, and so we've been working really closely, particularly, so our engagement has been through the environmental standard of the Farm Assurance Program. Obviously it's a lot broader than that, but again ensuring that we have really close alignment with those and that what we're doing underpins what they're doing, and I guess vice versa as well, and so that the idea is to reduce or remove duplication for farmers, and so that everything's a lot more efficient and effective for farmers.
And we touched on it earlier, you know, Beef and Lamb New Zealand as the industry good organisation has basically zero ability to enforce a lot of this stuff. and not saying it will happen or will be onerous, but that's potentially through companies that are having their farmers sign up to the farm assurance program. That could be where farmers find it becoming a requirement of supply. Is that sort of
potentially? I guess it's if farmers choose to trade under that brand, then they would. But the flip side of that is that the idea is increased profitability. So there's some good incentives to do that.
So have you spoken? Obviously Red Meat's talked with some of the red meat processors and marketers about this stuff as well?
We haven't personally around the environment strategy work, but the team that did the Taste Pure Nature obviously have done a huge amount of work with them to bring all of those people together.
So you talked at the start about who you'd spoken to, who'd had input, pulling the strategy together. It's been launched out there. What's happening now, for farmers that are listening to this? Is there going to be opportunities to sit down and talk about it more face-to-face, or what's your plans from here on, Julia?
In terms of the environment
in terms
strategy?
Of rolling this out, taking it out to farmers, are we running a whole series of farmer meetings around the country, or what's the plan?
We weren't intending to. Obviously, we welcome if farmers want more information, more than happy to come out and talk to whoever to share more. But there's been a lot of work in pulling this information together. So for us, the priority now is like head down, bum up, and actually get some of this work delivered. Roll it out.
Yep. Okay, so if people do want to find out more, what's the best way for them to get some more detail, get a copy of the strategy, all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so I guess in the first instance, jump online and pull out the strategy and have a read of it. And then if you've got any questions, then absolutely welcome phone calls, emails. Happy to come out and have a chat to groups. So just get in touch with me or someone in the environment team, or just wider in Beef and Lamb, and we can ensure that we can get someone out to you.
Yep, and as usual, we'll stick the 0800 number as well as the inquiries email in the description here, and hopefully if people want to follow up more, they're most welcome to. So look, we'll wrap it up, I think, unless I'll give you a chance in a moment if there's anything else you've thought of that you wanted to cover, but that's the strategy, that's what we're talking about, what we want to achieve. What if I'm a sheep and beef farmer listening to this or watching this video at the moment, what would you want me to go out and start this afternoon or tomorrow morning? What's the first thing farmers should be doing?
I guess so. Our biggest goal is around that the farm environment plans or the land environment plans, and so if you don't have one of those plans, have a think about whether that's something that you'd like to do, and get in touch with your local extension manager or someone else at Beef and Lamb about starting to get one of those underway.
Yep. So, and I actually just had a look at eDiary this morning. I see there's land and environment plan workshops still happening around the country, so they're still valid. They're not going to be outdated, and people get along to them.
Absolutely. They're, while we're updating the template, they're still a great resource to get involved in, especially land environment plans 2 and 3.
They're onto the ladder. Okay, look, is there anything else you'd like to add, Julia, that we haven't discussed?
No, I think we've covered everything.
Excellent. All right, look, we've covered a lot of material there, ladies and gentlemen, and as I say, it's a detailed strategy, so I encourage you to get a hold of a copy, have a look through, and get a feel for what it means for you in your business. But Julia Beijeman, Environment Strategy Manager, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Harry.
And thank you all for listening, and we'll be following up this one pretty soon with a couple of topics we've just heard us discuss, NZFAP, the Farm Assurance Program, and certainly planning one on the Taste Pure Nature activity. So until then, thank you very much.